Today we'll be creating an advanced suggestion system using Discord.js. So let's see how this suggestion system is going to work. We have two slash commands that we're going to be creating in this video. The first is config suggestions, which has two subcommands. And as the name suggests, this command will help us configure suggestions within a specific server. The other slash command is the main slash suggest command, which all users will be able to run in order to post their suggestions. However, since we haven't actually configured the bot, if we try to run this command, you'll notice that it says the bot hasn't been configured yet. So let's go ahead and configure this bot by running the command that we're provided. And by running this command, we can choose a channel where we can configure this bot. So I'm just going to choose this one channel right here. However, you can set up multiple channels, as many as you want. Once we run that command, it's going to say added bots to suggestion channel. So now we're going to try to run the main suggest command once again. It'll now give us a modal with one input field where we can go ahead and type the suggestion that we want to input. So I'm just going to go ahead and type some random text and I'll go ahead and click on submit. You'll now notice that it says suggestion created, which we can dismiss, but there's also a new message which everybody else can see. Over here, you're going to see that the suggestion itself was provided as a field within an embed, and we also have a status. This status can be changed from pending to approved or rejected by administrators of the server. So administrators will be able to click on approve or reject in order to change the status of this embed. So let's go ahead and change this to approve. And you'll notice it says that the suggestion has been approved and the suggestion embed has been edited. The status was changed over here, the embed color was also changed, and the two buttons for approving and rejecting the embed have also been removed. Now you'll also notice that there is a vote field, which can be changed by clicking on upvote or downvote. So I'm going to go ahead and click on upvote, and you're going to now see that it says upvoted suggestion. It has also reflected the change over here, and you'll notice that the progress bar has also changed. Now, if I go ahead and click on the downvote button, I cannot actually change the results because I've already cast my vote for this suggestion. However, if I could, or theoretically if somebody else clicked on the downvote button, then it's going to change the progress bar accordingly. So that's how our suggestion system is going to work. So let's go ahead and get started with the code. Now to save time, I'll have the starter files that I'm using linked down below, but if you already have your own Discord.js project, you don't really have to worry about that. In this video, I'm using my new command kit command handler library. However, if you have another library in mind, then feel free to use that. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be installing Mongoose. Now, I'm guessing you already have a database set up, but if you don't, then I have a full guide on that down below. But in this video, I'm just going to show you how to connect to that database. So to install Mongoose, just go ahead and type npm install mongoose. Once the package has been installed, head over to your index.js file, which is inside the source folder. And what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and import Mongoose. So once you have imported Mongoose, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we connect to our database before we log into our bots. The way we can do that is we can cut that and say mongoose.connect, and we're going to say process.env.mongodb URI. Now our MongoDB URI actually lives inside our .env file, and because I cannot open it to show you, I can show you this example.env file, which looks something like this. The token is our bot's token, and MongoDB URI is of course our MongoDB connection string. Again, if you don't already have a MongoDB database set up, then go ahead and check out the MongoDB tutorial that I have on my channel. I'll have that linked down below. So back in our index.js file, what we want to do is we want to go ahead and use the .then method, which will run after we have connected to our MongoDB database. So we're going to go ahead and console log over here saying connected to MongoDB. And right after that, we're going to go ahead and paste what we copied earlier, which is client.login. And we're going to log into our bot right after we connect to the database. So now we can go ahead and save this file. And what we're going to do is we're now going to create our MongoDB schemas. So we're going to be using two different schemas. One is going to be for our guild configuration, which is our server configuration. Basically, we're going to be storing our suggestion channel IDs within that guild configuration schema. And the other schema that we're going to be creating is the suggestion schema itself. The suggestion schema is basically going to be holding the content of the suggestion and the number of votes and all the important information. So let's go ahead and create a folder inside source, and I'm going to call this models. And inside of this, the first thing that I'm going to create is guild configuration.js. Now in this file, we're going to go ahead and import Mongoose. And from Mongoose, we're going to go ahead and destructure a few things. The first thing is the schema class. The next thing is the model function. So let's go ahead and define our guild config schema, which is going to be guild configuration schema. And we're going to set this to a new instance of the schema class. And inside this, we're going to go ahead and store our server ID, which I'm going to be saving it as guild ID. And this is going to have a type of string and required true. After this, we also want to store the suggestion channel IDs. So let's go ahead and store that using suggestion channel IDs. And because this is going to be an array of strings, we can go ahead and set the type to string like this. Now, because we want a default value so that we don't run into errors, we can set the default value like this to an empty array. Now, that's all the information that we really want to store about a specific server. So let's go ahead and import this schema using module.exports. And we're going to export using the model function, which will have, first of all, the name of the schema, which is guild configuration, and then the schema itself, which is guild configuration schema. So let's save this file and move on to our next schema, which is suggestion.js. Now, inside of the suggestion schema, just like with our guild config, we're going to go ahead and import Mongoose. And from this library, of course, we're going to go ahead and import schema and model. So let's define our suggestion schema using const suggestion schema equals to a new instance of the schema class. And in here, we're going to go ahead and create a unique suggestion ID. So I'm going to be calling this suggestion ID like this, and this will have a type of string. Now, because we want to generate a random suggestion ID every single time, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and import a library called crypto. And don't worry about installing this. This is already within Node.js. From this library, I'm going to go ahead and import the random UUID function. And I'm going to set the default for our suggestion ID to random UUID. Now, this is important. You're not supposed to call this function, but just leave this the way it is. This way, whenever a new document is created for this suggestion schema, it is going to call this random UUID function. The next thing that we're going to be storing is the author ID. So type string, required true. And our author ID is pretty much the person who created the suggestion. Next is the guild ID, which of course is the ID of our server. And this is also going to be required. The next thing is going to be the message ID. The message ID is pretty much the message that was sent to Discord by our bot, the one which basically holds the embeds. So this is going to be type string, required true, and unique true as well. Next, we're going to go ahead and store the content of the suggestion. So let's set content to type of string and required to true. Right after this, we're going to create another field called status, and this is also going to be a type of string. And basically, this is going to be either pending, approved, or rejected. By default, we want this to be pending. So let's set it at that. Right after status, we need the upvotes, and the upvotes is not going to be a number of upvotes. Remember that we also want to store basically who voted so that they cannot vote again. So what this is going to be is type of array of string, which is pretty much going to be holding the user IDs within this upvotes array. The default is going to be an empty array, and we can go ahead and do the same basically for downvotes. So this is basically going to be an array of user IDs. Now, if you also want to store basically the timestamps when this document was created and updated, you can go ahead and pass in another object, which will have timestamps set to true. This is, however, totally optional. And of course, at the end, we're going to go ahead and export the schema. So we're going to say module.exports, and we're going to export it using the model function. And this is going to be suggestion and of course, suggestion schema. So we can go ahead and save this file and close out of it. Okay, so our schemas are done, and we can now move on to our config suggestions command. So within my commands folder, I'm going to create a new file called config suggestions.js. And this file will, just like DJS commander, it's going to be exporting an object. So let's say module.exports and export an object. This will have data, run, which is basically a function, as well as options. Don't worry, I'm going to explain what each one of these do in just a moment. Before this, let's go ahead and import the guild configuration schema. So let's say const guild configuration and set this to require and go up one level to the models folder and get guild configuration. Okay, so now let's go ahead and start with data. So the data is basically going to be the structure of our slash command. Now, because our config suggestions command is going to have subcommands and stuff, I don't want to use this object right here. Instead, what I'm going to be using is a slash command builder class, which needs to be imported from Discord.js just like this. So we're going to set data to a new instance of the slash command builder class. And the first method that we're going to be attaching to this is called setName. And this is going to be the name of the command. In this case, it's config suggestions. And then we also need a description, so set description. However, I don't really think the description here matters because we have subcommands which are basically going to be overlapping. So let's set the description to configure suggestions. And the next method that I'm going to chain is called setDMPermissions, and this is going to be false. And the reason why we're doing this is by default, all the slash commands that we create are going to be registered globally. When commands are registered globally, they are also available in direct messages by default. So by setting DM permissions to false, these slash commands will not be registered in direct messages, and they can only be executed within servers. So I'm going to reformat my code like this so it looks a little cleaner. And right after this, I'm going to chain another method called add subcommand. And we are going to, of course, configure this subcommand as well. So I'm going to say subcommand dot set name, and the name is going to be add. Basically, to configure our suggestions, we're going to be adding a channel. We also need to set a description, which is going to be add a suggestions channel. And once again, I'm going to go ahead and reformat my code so it's easier to read. And to this, I'm going to add another method called add channel option. And this option we can also go ahead and configure. You can already see the problem of slash command builders. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move this all the way down so that my run function is at the top all the time. So let's go ahead and configure our option. So I'm going to say option.setName, and I'm going to set this to channel. This is going to be the name of our option in our slash command. We can also set a description for this option called the channel you want to add. Once again, I'm going to go ahead and reformat my code. And because we only want text channels to be available, what I'm going to do is I'm going to chain a method called add channel types. And to set our channel types to only text channels, let's go ahead and import channel type from Discord.js. So we're going to take this channel type and we're going to set this to .guildText. And of course, we want this option to be required. So we're going to say set required to true. So hopefully this is not too complicated. Now, of course, we need another subcommand for removing a channel. So I'm going to go ahead and take this. Actually, I'm going to remove the comma from here and I'm going to duplicate this. So this subcommand is now going to be called remove, and the description is going to be remove a suggestions channel and the channel you want to remove. So I can reformat this. Actually, there were no changes. So what we can do now is we can save this and we can work on our options. Our options is actually very simple, and this thing is handled using our command handler. The thing that we're going to be adding within our options is user permissions, which is basically an array of permissions that the user must have in order to run this command. Now, as I mentioned, this options object is handled by my command handler called command kit. So I can basically go ahead and add a permission over here called administrator, and it'll handle the checking of permissions and replying to the user automatically. However, if you're not using this command handler, what you can do is, of course, we're going to first destructure interaction, and within your run function, you would have to manually check for this permission. So what you would do is you would say if not interaction.member permissions.has, and then you'd check an administrator. And then of course you do something about this, which is most likely reply to the user, and then also be sure to return. However, as I said, my command handler handles all of that automatically, so I'm not going to bother with that. Now, one more thing that I'm also going to add before this run function is a comment, which is going to help me get some IntelliSense. So I can set this to objects, and I'm going to paste this right here. And for chat input command interaction, I'm going to import this from Discord.js. This is completely optional. Basically what this does is if you type interaction dot, you now have a bunch of IntelliSense, which you would not have if I go ahead and remove this. So if I now try to do this, of course, we don't have all those options over here. So I'm going to paste this just so it's easier for you guys and myself. Okay, so now I'm going to make this run function asynchronous because we're going to be using await inside of it. And the first thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be fetching our guild configuration using the schema. So let's say let guild configuration equals await guild configuration dot find one. And we're going to find one using the guild ID, which we can set to interaction dot guild ID. Now, if there is no guild configuration, we can go ahead and set the guild configuration to a new guild configuration. Basically, it's going to create a new guild configuration document in the database, and we're going to set the guild ID to interaction.guild ID. Now, don't worry about setting the suggestions channel over here. If you guys remember, by default, it does set it to an empty array. So right after this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and define my subcommand because we want to know if we're running the add subcommand or the remove subcommand. So I'm going to create a variable called subcommand, and I'm going to set this to interaction.options.get subcommand. And this is going to be a string. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say if subcommand exactly equals to add, then in this case, I'm going to say const channel equals interaction.options.get channel. And this is going to be the channel that was passed through the options. So we're going to be using this channel in order to push it into the database. So the next thing that we're going to check is if the channel that the person provided exists in the database already. So we're going to say if guild configuration dot suggestion channel IDs dot includes and then the channel dot ID. Then in this case, we're going to reply to the person by saying await interaction dot reply, and we're going to say channel is already a suggestions channel. And of course, we have to return right after. Now the code below this is only going to run if this channel does not exist inside the database. So in this case, what we're going to say is guild configuration dot suggestion channel IDs dot push, and then we're going to push the channel dot ID that the person provided. After this, we're going to save the data to our database using await guild configuration dot save, and then we're going to go ahead and reply to our user by saying await interaction dot reply, and we're going to say added channel to suggestion channels, and of course go ahead and return right after. Now that's our add subcommand. Let's go ahead and deal with our remove subcommand. So I'm going to say if subcommand exactly equals to remove, then in this case we're going to do the same thing. Basically, we're going to go ahead and fetch the channel from our interaction object, and now this time, instead of checking if the channel already exists in the database, we're going to check if this channel does not exist in the database. So we're going to say if not guild configuration dot suggestion channel IDs dot includes channel dot ID. Then in this case, we're going to go ahead and reply to the user by saying await interaction dot reply, and we're going to say channel is not a suggestion channel. Basically, this means the person is trying to remove a channel which does not exist within the database. So if that is the case, we also need to return. Now, right after this, just like we did over here, we need to go ahead and modify our database suggestion channels. In this case, we're going to remove the channel that the person provided. So to do that, we're going to say guild configuration dot suggestion channel IDs, and we're going to be setting this to guild configuration dot suggestion channel IDs, and we're going to filter out, basically we're going to be filtering out the IDs that do not match the channel dot ID. So basically, we are filtering the already existing suggestion channel IDs, and whatever channel ID does not match the provided channel ID is going to remain within the database. If it does match the channel ID that was provided, then that channel ID is going to be filtered out. Right after this, we have to save this. So I'm going to say await guild configuration dot save, and we're going to go ahead and reply to the user by saying await interaction dot reply, and we're going to say removed channel from suggestion channels, and of course return right after. So I can save this and I can try to run my bot using node source/index.js because my index.js is within the source folder. So if I hit enter, once it connects to the database, it's going to log into our bot, and now it's going to say that the config suggestions command was registered globally. This is why we set the DM permissions to false, so that this command cannot be executed within direct messages. So now if we go over to Discord and try running config suggestions, you'll notice that there is one config suggestions command with two subcommands. Both of them take a channel, so let's try using the add subcommand. So as you can see, only text channels are supported, so let's try using the bots channel. So it basically added the bots channel to the database. If I try to run this command again with the same command, it's going to say that the channel is already a suggestions channel. So let's try to remove this channel using remove, and I'm going to remove it from bots. And as you can see, it says removed bots from suggestion channels. However, if I try to run it once again, it's going to say bots is not a suggestions channel. So that's pretty awesome. Let's move on to now creating this suggest command. So inside the commands folder, I'm going to create a new file called suggest.js. And just like our config suggestions command, this is also going to export an object. This object is going to have data, which is a very small command because it doesn't require any options or subcommands. So I'm going to set this to name suggest. Description is going to be basically create a suggestion. And then I'm also going to set the DM permission to false. That way the command is obviously not registered within direct messages. Next, we need the run function, which is going to destructure interaction. And just like I did before, I'm going to add this comment over here, which will give me IntelliSense. And now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be importing both our schemas from the models folder. So I'm going to go ahead and import guild configuration, which is going to be from the models folder, and guild configuration. I'm going to duplicate this, and this is going to be suggestion, and obviously the variable name is also suggestion. Oh, and because I'm using chat input command interaction over here, I must import it from Discord.js. So now let's go ahead and set up our run function. The first thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be fetching the guild configuration so that we can confirm that the person is running the command within the correct channel. So I'm going to say const guild configuration and set this to await guild configuration dot find one, and we're going to find one using guild ID, and this is going to be interaction dot guild ID. And because we're using await, this function must be asynchronous. So now there's two outcomes for this query. Basically, the guild configuration might not exist at all, or it might exist, but the channel IDs may not exist. So in both of those cases, we want to tell the user that the server has not been configured yet. So I'm going to say if not guild configuration, and this is going to have optional chaining because, as I said, this may not exist. So dot suggestion channel IDs dot length. So basically, if the guild configuration does not exist, or the suggestion channel IDs don't have any elements inside that array, then we can go ahead and reply by saying await interaction.reply, and we can say this server has not been configured to use suggestions yet. So in a new line, I'm going to say ask an admin to run the command config suggestions add to set this up, and obviously return right after. Now the next thing that we're going to be checking is if this channel exists within this suggestion channel IDs array. Because if it does not exist, then we want to tell the user that it's the incorrect channel. So I'm going to say if not guild configuration dot suggestion channel IDs dot includes, then we're going to be comparing it with interaction dot channel ID. So if that is the case, I'm going to say await interaction dot reply. And in this case, I'm going to say this channel is not configured to use suggestions. Try one of these channels instead. And what we're going to do is we're going to use template literals, and we're going to say guild configuration dot suggestion channel IDs, and we're going to map through them. And for each suggestion channel ID, we're going to return basically a template literal just like this with the ID. And because this is an array, what I'm going to do is I'm going to join them using .join, and I'm going to join them using commas. And obviously right after, we need to return. So what this will do is it will list out all the other available channels and then separate them using commas. Okay, so the code below this is going to run if the guild configuration channels is, well, the correct one. So we're going to go ahead and create a modal. So I'm going to say const modal equals new modal builder, and we're going to import this from Discord.js. So make sure you import this at the top. To this modal builder class, we're going to attach a method called setTitle, and this is going to be create a suggestion. We also want to set a custom ID. So we're going to say set custom ID, and this is going to be suggestion followed by the interaction user ID. So this is a custom ID for basically the person running the slash command. Next, let's go ahead and define the text input that we're going to be passing into this modal. So I'm going to say const text inputs, and we're going to set this to a new instance of the text input builder class. And once again, we have to import this from Discord.js. I'm using autocomplete, but make sure that is also imported from the top right here. And of course, for this class, we're going to be attaching some methods as well. So I'm going to say set custom ID, and this is going to be suggestion inputs. So we're going to be using this custom ID to retrieve the value that was passed into text input. We need another method called setLabel, and this is basically going to be the label that goes over the input field itself. So in this case, it's going to be what would you like to suggest? The next method that we're going to chain is called setStyle. Now styles can be two different styles. I believe it's called short and paragraph. The one that we're going to be using is called paragraph, obviously, because suggestions can be quite long. So we're going to set this to text input style. And once again, make sure to import this from Discord.js. And we're going to set this to text input style dot, and this is going to be paragraph. We also want to set required to true so that the person must fill out this input field right here. The next thing that we want to do is set a max length, and I'm going to set this to 1000. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is because we are showing our custom suggestions in an embed. If you guys don't know, inside an embed, I believe the fields can only hold a maximum of 1000 characters. So when we do show our suggestions, our max length must be 1000. By default, this paragraph style is 4000, so that's basically 4 times the maximum, and we are going to get an error if you don't set this. Now, to bundle this text input into this modal, we need to use something called an action row. So we're going to create a variable called action row and set this to a new action row builder, once again importing this from Discord.js. To this, we're going to be chaining only one method called add components, and this component is going to be text inputs. If you have multiple text inputs, you can obviously add them over here just like this. I only have one, which is the paragraph, so I'm going to be using it like this. Now let's go ahead and show this modal that we just created to the user. The way we can do that is by saying await interaction.show modal. And then we're going to be passing in this modal variable that we just created. So the code below this is only going to run after the modal has been shown to the user, which means we can wait for the user to submit their modal. So the way we're going to be handling that is, first of all, we need to create a filter. This filter will have the interaction as the parameter, and this interaction custom ID must exactly match the custom ID that we set earlier. If you remember, the custom ID that we're looking for is this one right here, basically the modal custom ID. So this filter is either going to be true or false, depending on this condition right here. So the way we're going to be using this filter is we're going to create a variable called modal interaction, and I'm going to set this to await interaction dot await modal submit, and this takes in a few properties. Well, the first one is filter, obviously, this one right here. The interaction is passed in automatically, so you don't have to worry about that. The next is the time. So this time is important. It's basically the amount of time that your code is going to wait for the modal to be submitted. So I'm going to set this to something like 3 minutes, which I think is quite fair. 3 minutes to pass in a suggestion is pretty decent, I'd say. So I'm going to set this to 1000, which is 1 second in milliseconds. I'm going to multiply this by 60, which is going to be 1 minute. And I'm going to multiply this by 3 because I want this to be 3 minutes. So the next method that I'm going to be chaining onto this interaction is called catch. So this catch method is most likely going to run when this time has run out and the user has not submitted the modal. In that case, there's nothing much that I'm going to do except I'm just going to console log the error that we get. Okay, so now we have the modal interaction. So what we're going to do with this modal interaction is we're going to say await modal interaction dot defer reply, and we're going to set the ephemeral to true. This is basically going to tell the user that our bot is thinking and we're basically creating the suggestion behind the scenes. Now I'm going to create a variable called letSuggestionMessage. This is the message that we're going to be sending over to Discord. I'm going to have a try catch block over here, and we're going to try setting the suggestion message to await interaction.channel.send, and then creating suggestion, please wait. And then within the catch, we're going to say modal interaction dot edit reply. And then we're going to tell the user that, well, we failed to create a suggestion message in this channel. And the most likely reason that this happens is when our bot does not have enough permissions to send message within that specific channel. So I'm going to be saying failed to create suggestion message in this channel. I may not have enough permissions. And I'd say that's a very descriptive message. After this, obviously, make sure to return. And now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be fetching the suggestion that the user submitted inside that modal. So I'm going to create a variable called suggestion text and set this to modal interaction dot fields dot get text input value. And then within this, we're going to be passing in the custom ID of the input field. If you remember, the custom ID for this is suggestion input. So let's go ahead and paste this over here. Now let's go ahead and prepare the new suggestion to be pushed to the database. So I'm going to say const new suggestion equals new suggestion. And then we're going to pass in an object. The author ID is going to be interaction user ID. The guild ID is going to be interaction.guild ID. The message ID is the message that was pretty much sent. So we're going to set this to suggestion message.id. Then we also want to save the content. So content is going to be suggestion text. Suggestion text. And then we can save this suggestion to our database using await new suggestion.save. Okay, so the code below this is going to run once the suggestion has been saved to our database. So let's go ahead and edit our reply using modal interaction.edit reply. And then within this, we're going to reply by saying the suggestion was created. So this is a dismissible message. That's why we've kept it very short and descriptive. Now what we want to do is we want to create the embed, which is going to be set for the message that we just sent. So this is going to be our suggestion embed. So we're going to create a variable called suggestion embed set to a new embed builder. And then to this, obviously, we're going to chain a few methods. The first one is set author, which is going to be the information of the person writing the suggestion. So the name is going to be interaction user username. I don't recommend using tag because obviously it's outdated at this point. And then the icon URL is going to be interaction.user.display avatar URL. And then we're going to set the size to 256. Next, we're going to chain another method called add fields. And then this is going to take in an array. So there are going to be a few fields. The first one is going to be the suggestion itself that the person added, which is name suggestion. And then the value is going to be the suggestion text. The next field is going to be the status of the suggestion. Remember, our suggestion can be pending, approved, or rejected. So in this case, we're going to set the status, and then the value is going to be by default pending. And I'm just going to go ahead and add this emoji right here just so it looks a little more fancy. And then I'm going to go ahead and add another object, and this is going to be for the number of votes. So the value of this is going to be determined by a function that we want to create. So within the source folder, I'm going to create a new folder called utils. And then I'm going to create a file called format results.js. Now, what I want you to do is go to the link in the description and just paste the code that you were given. And this code will basically create a string for us with the number of votes and also determine the progress bar. Now, it's not automatically going to work for you because you must set your emojis over here. And these emojis are, well, the custom emojis that I have in my server. I will also have them linked down below, but these emojis are basically these emojis right here. It's this, and well, the progress bar emojis that you saw at the start of the video. I will have them linked down below, but in order to get this string right here, you must set it like this. So the first one is LE, which is basically left empty. So you can go ahead and choose LE like this. And the way you can get this string right here is by adding a backslash at the start and hitting enter. This will give you this custom ID, so you can just copy it and paste it right here. Obviously, it's the same, it didn't change, and the reason is I've already configured it, but you want to go ahead and change this with your own custom emoji. Don't worry, I will have them linked down below and properly labeled so you're not confused, but ME means middle empty, RE right empty, and then LF means left full, MF means middle full, and RF means right full. So just go ahead and configure each one of your emoji right here, and once you've done that, go ahead and save your file, and back inside suggest, we're going to set this to format results, and we need to import this from the utils folder. And then obviously make sure that it was imported at the top of your file. So anyway, by default, this is going to format our results to 0 votes because that is the default value. And for the default value, we also want to set a color. This color is going to be yellow because the yellow color is going to indicate that the status of the suggestion is set to pending. So our suggestion embed is done. Now we want to go ahead and configure the buttons that we want to send alongside this embed. So the first button that we're going to be creating is upvote button, and this is going to be set to a new instance of the button builder class, which once again, make sure you import it from Discord.js. So anyway, to this button builder class, we're going to be chaining a few methods. The first one is the emoji. For this one, obviously it's thumbs up for upvote. Obviously you can change this to whatever you want. We're going to set the label for this, which is the text that goes next to the emoji. And we're going to set this to upvote. Next, we want to set the style. And to set the style, we need to import something called button style, which will also be imported from Discord.js like this. And we can set the style to button style.primary. Primary is basically the blue button color. So we're going to set this to both upvote and downvote. We also want to go ahead and set a custom ID. So this custom ID is important. What you want to set here first is suggestion, which is the category itself. And then within this, we want to go ahead and pass in the new suggestion ID that was created from our database. So we're going to set this to new suggestion.suggestion ID and then dot once again. And then we're going to pass in the action for this button, which in this case is upvote. Later on, when we're listening for button clicks, this custom ID will be very important. So make sure you set this to what I've just set this to. Now we're going to go ahead and duplicate this upvote button to, well, downvote button. So I'm going to replace this to downvote button. And I'm going to go ahead and change the emoji to a thumbs down. I'm going to change the label to downvote, obviously. Button style is going to be primary. The custom ID can remain the same until the end. So we want to change the upvote to downvote, and that's pretty much our downvote button. Now, if you remember, admins have the buttons to approve and reject the buttons. So let's create another button called approve button, and this is going to be set to a new button builder class. And we're going to set the emoji to, first of all, the check mark, and this will be to approve the suggestion. Next, we need to set the label for this button, and we're going to set this to approve. And then we also want to set the style and button style dot success. This style will basically be a green button color. Next, we also want to set a custom ID, which I'm just going to go ahead and copy this right here. And instead of downvote, this one is going to be approve. We can go ahead and duplicate this, and we're going to change this to reject button. And then the emoji is going to be a trash icon. And then the label is going to be reject, as well as the custom ID. Now, to pass in these buttons, we need to add them to a row. The upvote and downvote button are going to be at the top, while the approve and reject button are going to be at the bottom. So these two buttons must be in their own row. So let's create our first row, which is going to be set to a new action row builder, which is also from Discord.js. And then we need to change the method called add components. And for the first row, we need to pass in the upvote button as well as the downvote button. We can go ahead and duplicate this. And instead of first row, we're going to change this to second row. And the components that we're going to be adding is approve button and then reject button. Okay, so we have all the data. Now what we want to do is we want to edit the message that we initially sent. So I'm going to say suggestion message dot edit, and we're going to go ahead and edit. So I'm going to set the content to interaction dot user. which is basically going to be pinging them. And we're going to say suggestion created. So it's going to mention the person who created the suggestion, and it's going to tell them, well, the suggestion was created. And then we need to pass in the embeds, which is only one embed, and that is the one that we created earlier called suggestion embed. Next, the components, which is going to be the buttons, and the components is going to be first row and second row. So there we have it. What I'm going to do actually is I'm going to go ahead and copy this entire thing, or cut this entire thing, and I'm going to go ahead and put this inside a try catch block so that we can handle any errors. Inside the catch block, I'm going to go ahead and console log and say error in /suggest, and then we're going to go ahead and pass in the error that we got. And that's our suggest command done. Now we're moving on to the final file for this video, which is going to be created inside the events folder, and we're going to create a new folder called interaction create. Basically, we're going to be listening for button clicks. Inside this, I'm going to be creating a file called handle suggestions.js. And unlike our command files, this one is going to be exporting a function. This function must be asynchronous, obviously. Within the parameters, we have the interaction object. And obviously, to get some IntelliSense, I'm going to be using the code that I did earlier. And then I'm going to be using this interaction from Discord.js. Obviously, this part is optional. If you don't care about IntelliSense, then feel free to ignore this. So the next thing that we want to import is the suggestion schema. So I'm going to say const suggestion, and I'm going to set this to require, go to the models folder, and suggestion. Now inside our function, the first thing that we want to check obviously is if the interaction is a button or not. So I'm going to say if not, interaction is button, or if not interaction.custom ID. In that case, we're going to go ahead and return. So if this interaction was not a button click, or if this interaction does not have a custom ID, then we're going to return. Basically, this entire thing depends on the custom ID, because if you remember, we had all our actions and our custom IDs stored within that. Now I'm going to be adding a try catch, and inside the catch, I'm just going to go ahead and console log saying error in handle suggestions.js. And then I'm going to go ahead and pass in the error. Now inside the try block, we're going to be defining all the things from within the custom ID. So let's just go ahead and say interaction.customid.split, and then we're going to split from the dot. If you remember, inside our suggest command, we use dots to basically distinguish between the different actions, the IDs, and what we're targeting. So what we're going to do is we're going to set this to const and an array. And the reason for that is because when we split, we get an array. So we're going to be using an array to retrieve all the items in order. So the first thing is going to be the type, which is in our case going to be called suggestion. And then the middle thing is the suggestion ID. Finally, the last thing is the action, basically upvote, downvotes, approve, and reject. Now let's go ahead and run some conditions on these variables. So I'm going to say if not type, or no suggestion ID, or no action. If that is the case, we can go ahead and return. We also want to check if the type is not equal to suggestion, then we can return. Basically, that means that's some other button. Now, right under this, we're going to go ahead and defer a reply. And we're also going to set the ephemeral to true. So only the person who clicked the button can see this message. So now let's go ahead and fetch this suggestion from our database. So I'm going to say const target suggestion equals to await suggestion dot find one, and we're going to find it by its suggestion ID. So I'm going to set this to suggestion ID. Next, we need to go ahead and fetch the target message, basically the message with the embed on it. So I can say const target message, and this is going to be await interaction dot channel dot messages dot fetch, and then we're going to fetch the message using this target suggestion. So target suggestion dot message ID. Next, let's go ahead and get the embed that was within this target message. So we're going to say const target message embed, and this is going to be target message dot embeds, and then the first embed. So this means we have to use the 0th index. Now the reason why we're fetching the embed is obviously because we want to edit the details within it. So now let's go ahead and check what type of action we're dealing with. It can be an upvote, downvote, it can be approve or reject. I think we should start with approve. So I'm going to say if action exactly equals to approve, then in this case, we can say if not interaction dot member permissions dot has, and then we're going to check if they don't have the administrator permissions, because if you remember, only administrators can approve or reject suggestions. Obviously, if you want to set different permissions, then by all means, feel free to do that. I'm just going to set this to administrator because it's very convenient. If that is the case, we're going to go ahead and edit our reply. And in this case, we can go ahead and reply by saying you do not have permission to approve suggestions. And obviously, go ahead and return right after. Now what we want to do is we want to edit the suggestion status in our database. So we can say target suggestion.status, and we can set this to approved. Now we also want to edit the embed from our message. So let's say target message embed.data.color, and we're going to set the color to green. Now you can't really just set it to the color green like this, the string green, sorry. You must set it to the hex color, and that too, you must use it like this. So it must start with a 0x, and you must not have the hash symbol. I don't know why, but strings just don't work. We also want to go ahead and change the status text in our embed. So I'm going to say target message embed.fields, and then the second field, which is the first index, dot value, and set this to approved. And for that, I'm going to be using the check emoji. Okay, so we've changed all the details. Let's go ahead and save them. So I'm going to say await target suggestion.save. And then we can also go ahead and reply to the interaction by saying interaction.edit reply. And then we can say suggestion approved. And then we also want to edit the target message. So I'm going to say target message.edit. And then we're going to pass in an object. This object is going to have the embeds, which is the updated target message embed. And here's the important part. We want to get rid of the approve and reject buttons. So to do that, we have to just remove the second row that we added. So we can set components to only the first component. So target message.components and only the first component, which is obviously the 0th index. So that's about it for the approve action. Right after this, make sure to return. And now we can move on to the reject action. So I'm going to say if action equals to reject, and we're going to have a lot of the same things. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this permissions. And then we're going to say you do not have permission to reject suggestions. And then we also want to go ahead and change the target suggestion.status to, well, rejected, obviously. Next, we also want to go ahead and change the target message embed.data.color to this color code right here, which is a red color. And then we can go ahead and set target message embed.fields, which is the second field, so the first index, .value, and the value is going to be rejected. Okay, so we've now changed the values, so let's go ahead and save them. So I'm going to say await target suggestion.save. And then we also want to edit our reply. So interaction.edit reply. And this is going to be suggestion rejected. Right after this, we also want to go ahead and edit our target message. So I'm going to say target message.edit. And then we're going to pass in the embeds, which is going to be the updated target message embed. And just like we did before, we need to set components to target message.components, and then just the first component, which is the 0th index, so that we can go ahead and remove the approve and reject buttons. After this, we are going to go ahead and return. So our approve and our reject buttons should technically work. So let's go ahead and test them out. So I'm going to go ahead and start my bot using node source index.js. So back in Discord, we're going to try to run the suggest command. So /suggest. And if I try to run it, well, it shouldn't run because obviously we removed it from our suggestions channel. So let's go ahead and configure it once again. And I'm going to go ahead and add this bots channel. Okay, so it says added bots to suggestions channel. So let's try to run the suggest command once again. Okay, so I tried to run the /suggest command and it's not running. It basically gives me the error that invalid array length. And the error is actually related to our suggest command. And that's because we didn't actually deal with our action row variable. It's currently almost 3 a.m. So please don't blame me for this. I'm running on very little sleep. So anyway, the problem here is we did not add action row to our modal. So we can go ahead and set this to modal.add components, and we need to go ahead and add this action row. So I'm going to save this and I'm going to restart it using node source index.js, and this should fix the problem. So back in Discord, I'm going to try to run /suggest once again. So this time it's actually going to come up with a modal. So I can go ahead and type in some random text like this is a testing suggestion, and I can go ahead and submit this. Okay, so it seems like we have another problem. And if I check my terminal, it says suggestion validation failed. Message ID is required. So it seems like we did not actually provide the message ID. I just set this to message. So this is a little typo. So just go ahead and set this to message ID. Once again, I apologize. It's like 3 a.m. So I may be missing out on some stuff. So anyway, we can go ahead and restart the bot. So back in Discord, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and delete this, and I'm going to try to run suggest once again. Now we get a modal, so I'm going to say this is a testing suggestion, and I'm going to go ahead and submit this. It's going to go ahead and say suggestion created, and then we have, well, basically a suggestion. Now, I forgot to change the reject button to red, but don't worry, the functionality is still the same. I'm going to show you how to change this to red in just a second. So in this case, if I go ahead and try to approve this, it's going to say suggestion approved, and then the approve and reject buttons have been removed. Basically, the entire row was removed, and the color has also changed to green. The status has been changed to approve, and I can basically try to run this command once again and test out the reject as well. So I can say test once again, and once the suggestion is created, we can go ahead and try to reject this. It's now going to say suggestion rejected, and the color changes to red, status changes to rejected, and there we have it. Let's go ahead and quickly change the color for our button to red. So we can go down, and for our reject button, we can set the style to danger and save it. So anyway, back to our handle suggestions.js, which is inside our events, we can go ahead and continue with the upvote now. So we can go ahead and say if action equals to upvote. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to check if the person has already voted. So either upvote or downvote. So in that case, I'm going to create a variable called const has voted, and I'm going to set this to target suggestion.votes or upvotes dot includes interaction user ID, or target suggestion dot downvotes dot includes interaction user ID. So if has vote, or has voted actually, that's a little typo. If has voted, then we can go ahead and reply by saying await interaction dot edit reply, and we're going to say you have already casted your vote for this suggestion, and obviously return. The code below this is going to run if the person has not voted. So we're going to go ahead and push their vote. So I'm going to say target suggestion dot upvotes dot push, and then interaction user ID. And then we're going to go ahead and say await target suggestion dot save. And after that is done, we can go ahead and say await or interaction dot edit reply. And we're going to say upvoted suggestion. Now, obviously, we also want to go ahead and update our message. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say target message embed dot fields. And then we're going to go ahead and get the third field, which is our votes. And we're going to set the value to format results. And format results, we can't really import the function using IntelliSense. So we're going to go ahead and manually import this function from the utils folder. So from the top, we can go ahead and define format results and set this to require, go up to the utils folder and format results. So we can come back down here and set this to format results. And the first argument is going to be target suggestion dot upvotes, which is going to be the new upvotes, and then target suggestion dot downvotes. Finally, we can go ahead and update the message with this new embed. So I'm going to say target message dot edit, and then we're going to set embeds to target message embed. And then we're going to go ahead and return right after. Now the logic for downvote is, as you guessed it, pretty similar. So I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate this and set the action to downvote. And if has voted, well, we don't really have to change this logic right here. And instead of pushing this to upvotes, we're going to be pushing this to downvotes. And then we're going to be saving it. And then our interaction reply is going to be downvoted suggestion and everything else seems to be fine. So we can go ahead and save this file and try to restart our bot. So our bot has logged in. If we go to Discord and we try to upvote our previous suggestion, it's going to say upvoted suggestion, and it has 1 upvotes, 0 downvotes, and it's 100% on upvotes. And as you can see, the progress bar has filled automatically. Well, I can't really upvote once again to show you the progress bar, as it's going to say you have already casted your vote for the suggestion. I am, however, going to try to suggest another thing, and this is obviously going to be test once again, and I'm going to try to downvote this time. So it's going to say downvoted suggestions, and the progress bar did not change at all because, well, it's downvotes. Now, as you can see, the reject button has also changed to a red color, so that's pretty cool. So we can try to click on reject, and it says suggestion rejected. So that is about it when it comes to this advanced suggestion system. So if you guys are having any issues, then be sure to join my Discord and ask your questions in the help channels. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.